Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
No,
around the body. Jazz up!
He's off! From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Fuck! I can't believe it.
And a good time of day to you as well. This is episode number 244 of Americans Watching the Footy as we recap the 7-game round 14. I am Benjamin Castle coming to you from San Diego, California.
I'm Ethan Castle coming to you from South San Francisco, California.
Hey, welcome home. So you did make it back to Fort Wayne after that rainout?
Yes, and then really glad that I ended up switching my connecting flight last minute. Well, my initial flight plan would have gotten me home just fine, but then the flight that I had pushed to ended up getting canceled, so I'm really glad I flew into Oakland instead of SFO, so everything worked out eventually.
And that wasn't the end of your Oakland foray, right?
Yeah, because I was there last night and we'll be back there tonight for Major League Cricket. T20, I've kept saying it's great. I think it's helping to get more people interested in cricket. Like, I'd say the crowd was probably like 80 to 90% Indian and other South Asian, but like there were definitely people there who were like watching cricket for the first time and getting familiar with it, and that's definitely been the case over these few days, and I think that's a great thing.
And, it's some decent quality players there. I mean, you saw a heck of a bowling performance from Zia-ul Haq on Monday.
Noor Ahmad and Nandre Berger also really good. Also got to see Marcus Stoinis, Heinrich Klaassen, among others.
Well, you hardly saw Klaassen because Zia-ul Haq dealt with him in one ball.
I mean, I got to see him as a wicketkeeper.
Fair, but I mean, when you see Heinrich, the expectation is 6s on 6s.
Yeah. It's funny because Seattle bowled decently well, held Texas to 153, and then they were all out at 60. So not the drama that a couple of the prior matches has had, so hopefully tonight between LA and Washington makes up for that.
LA's got a bunch of strong West Indies players, including Narayan, Russell, Powell. Washington would have Steve Smith if he hadn't dislocated his finger, but they still have, I see Glenn Maxwell and Mitch Owen.
I totally now understand just like how much fun in-person cricket is. And like if I was living in a country where cricket was the dominant summertime sport, I would be there all the time.
Do they play the trumpet?
They have not played the trumpet. It was mostly American music, like 1 or 2 Indian songs. I did hear the trumpet in Cleveland for stolen bases.
I've heard it before at a football game, a college football game.
I know. I want the trumpet to be like everywhere. I think that really is just like an IPL thing more so. So
yeah, but the University of San Diego's football team plays it for every first down. I feel like we're spending this time talking about cricket and other things because this was not the greatest round of footy.
No, I feel like this is one that we'll probably actually be able to run through pretty fast.
We had
2 close games, and one of those was really ugly. Actually, 3 close games.
We have 3 within 2 goals, and one of them was high quality.
Also, I wanted to get into something before we really get this rolling and say that I officially deny your belief that in sunrise footy and just Eastern time footy in general, at least on days when I had a lot of shit to do, I was exhausted. So I ended up watching a fair amount of these games after the fact, and there's still a couple that I need to get through yet.
Whether it's a vacation thing or like if it's an extended stay in Eastern time zone, I feel like I would get used to it at least for those primetime games. And I'm a morning guy anyway. You are most definitely not.
Yeah, so it was tough. Like, for example, if my day was really supposed to start somewhere around 10 or 11 a.m.
You'd have to start at 5:30 instead.
Yeah, and then usually, be going to bed like, between midnight and 2, then it was really, really difficult.
But it's pretty standard for me, like during the school year and stuff, to get up around 6:30. Well, The Thursday game, Saints and Bulldogs. Did you watch that one live?
In parts, and then I fell asleep, and this wasn't a game to shave your balls for, but if it was, it would have been an I shaved my balls for this type experience.
I think the I shaved my balls for this would be Friday, honestly.
At least that was close. Whether or not it was fun, it was at least close. This was rough. St. Kilda 8-12-60, defeated by the Western Bulldogs 20-12-132. I feel like these last 2 weeks have been just like a perfect crash course in Bulldogs football for anyone who's new to this. You have games like this where you just fly past your opponent and you see how insanely high the ceiling is. And then you have games where they just like underachieve like crazy. And this was one of the fly past your opponent games. Is Ed Richards the best player on the Bulldogs at this point? Obviously long-term, Marcus Bonampelli has such a great body of work, but as of late, Ed Richards has just been ridiculous, and that continued here. Was this the game where he had that awesome kick, kind of bicycled it from the ground? Yeah, he did. It set up a goal. It was like a secondary assist. It was one of my favorite plays of the year.
Yeah, so it can't be eligible for assist of the year because it has to be a primary assist, but this is something that should be in the round montage on Brownlow night. 12 goals to 6 in the middle quarters provided the separation that the Bulldogs needed, as this was exactly a 12-goal win. Sam Darcy's back. I now want to go back and take a look at Paul Salmon's highlights just to see the comparisons between him and Sam Darcy, to understand them more. Even with his inaccuracy at times, 3-2 from 19, 9 marks, he is probably the most unique player in the game right now, and it's great to have him back. I just want to see now if he could be the type of player that can help the Bulldogs elevate themselves above just playing to the level of their competition. I don't want to make a Pittsburgh Steeler comparison.
No, I think it's different, because with the Steelers, I think they find themselves in close games no matter what.
Who would it be then where their level is so clear that they take care of everyone below them, just struggle everywhere else?
I don't know. I think of Port in prior years, but I don't think that's exactly a fair comparison, because I think this Bulldogs team has shown the high-end talent against high-end opponents at times. They could also totally lay an egg against an inferior team. That's the difference with them.
Point is, the Bulldogs are the Bulldogs.
So Richards, goal, 25 disposals, 7 tackles, 7 clearances.
Yeah, 7 clearances is actually a game high here.
They kind of shared the wealth on that front. 11 score involvements, 15 contested possessions, and still operating at over 70% efficiency. 9 inside 50s. He was really good. A couple other guys who racked up stats, doing some padding once they were up comfortably, but impressed me nonetheless. Sam Davidson with 10 score involvements. That's second most.
Davidson's just had a solid year overall, have a goal in this one. I think the player, though, that has impressed us the most and kind of gone above expectations for us this year, he does kind of continue his rise from last year, but this is Joel Frazier's best game in a number of weeks. And with a more stocked midfield, they were able to start him a bit further back, and that worked really nicely. Frazier with a goal from 21, an active, real running play there. 6 score involvements and 4 intercepts for Frazier as well. One of their more versatile young players. We've said for, about half a year now that we understand why they persisted so much in having him play midfield. It was really necessary when they had all their injuries to Trelaw and Liberatore, but now he's playing a bit more natural role because he was more of a halfback to begin with. And now you see him kind of back of the center square, or a little bit behind that first guy to go into the center square from the defensive 50. He's fitting that role really well.
I just think of him as such a smooth player.
There are a lot of smooth players on this team. I think of Richards as becoming increasingly smooth as well. You can see Bailey Dale being like that also, just because he has the time often to be smooth.
There was some talk about him pregame and how really Geelong is one of the only teams that's really dedicated themselves to stopping him. And I thought this was also one of Dale's better games. It's funny that really one of the only positives I saw for both teams were good games for guys that I see as sometimes just racking up possessions. I thought Dale's kicks were actually really productive, made a lot of sense towards generating scores. And if not generating scores themselves, just setting someone else up to get free. I really liked how he played. And then on the other side, one of the only positives for St. Kilda, and I think a pretty clear polished turd pick, was Jack Sinclair actually playing a milestone game, right?
Yeah, number 200.
Him and then Marcus Windhager holding on to like 14 disposals. That's pretty much your entire list of Saints positives.
I mean, Nazaya got a goal from 31 and 9 marks, but
he wasn't his most refined. He was okay.
And Jack Steele was just kind of the guy that was always there at the source for tackling, but he was beaten enough. Jack McRae was beaten enough. I mean, nobody got a huge number of clearances. They both had 6, but the trends kind of post-clearance went in the Bulldogs' favor, whether it was inside or out, because you had Frazier dealing with things on the inside, among others. On the outside, Davidson, and also perhaps a career game from Bailey Truck Williams. He's good for games like this, like once or twice a year where he just absolutely goes off, and this was one of them. How about 10 marks and 4 score involvements in the first half alone? 17 marks to finish.
I think you liked his performance a bit more than I did. I thought he was good, but I thought he was one who kind of ended up accumulating numbers that made him look even better. And I just thought there were other players that were more significant. Not that Williams himself really did anything wrong. I just thought other guys were even better.
I mean, I'm going to highlight Riley Sanders for placing his kicks well, too. I think they've persisted with Sanders in a way that they didn't last year, and it's working out. 2 goals from 21 and 9 marks for Sanders. I didn't think he'd be as active as a mark as he's been, but that's worked. Aaron Naughton won against Callum Wilkie overall.
One of Naughton's better games a few weeks ago, he was really confident from Bulldogs fans. He's been better.
This was a game overall, though, where the talent gap and the gap in depth was apparent across the whole oval, starting from the middle and looking to the Dogs' forward 50. Because of the combination of talls and capable kicks for goal there, even Cal Wilkie, as I mentioned, was in trouble. The Dogs actually lost first possessions and clearances in the first quarter, but turned that around the second and gained further control from there. The Saints did have potential to get some momentum into halftime, but Marcus Windhager had a miss, and I feel like consecutive goals could have actually done something, but didn't happen. You know, I said last week that the Saints are not a team of moral victories, and I'm solidified even further in that belief here. You said, Ethan, during the progress reports that we did, borrowing from the Solid Verbal, that college football podcast that inspires a lot, that the Saints cannot win their clunkers. Ding, ding, ding. You said they're too reliant on guys like, a worst all-round candidate this week.
Well, Zach Jones has been so hit or miss, and he was really missing this game. I guess other things that went sort of well for the Saints, Brad Hill was decent. He had a couple rough games, but like this seemed like a game where the Saints, once this got out of hand, kind of mailed it in. You know, I'm not sure who gets dropped, but I think there's going to be some changes coming.
Axe swinging, if you will. Couple questions that I have from events throughout the game. Firstly, there was just bullshit with dangerous tackles and selling it again with, this was very early. This was Matt Kennedy selling the head contact when Hunter Clark tackled him. This is another one where, players should be forced off for shit like that.
This was like as bad as the one Sam Walsh stole on Dangerfield last year.
And people hated us for saying Walsh should have been fined. He should have been, and Kennedy should have been as well. Also, why are club doctors still doing tests? The league should recognize just the sheer potential for bias in that, and it's bad optics as well. I mean, you're worried about lawsuits, and yet you're leaving it up to the clubs to assess things.
Like, the league has been better about spotting them, even if they're not the ones themselves giving out the tests. So I'm not, as opposed to this.
Here's the other one that I don't feel good about either way. A former Saint umpiring Saints games. There's a conflict of interest there that could result in bias in either direction. Because Lee Fisher was on this game. Was on the Saints list for 8 years, played 55 games.
Now, fortunately, it did not affect this game at all.
Thankfully so, but something that I'm surprised to see. Seems like Saints fans were more so thinking that Fisher was being harsh toward them. Hawthorne 6-11-47 defeating Adelaide 5-14-44. Here's your case for a roofed stadium in Tasmania. Great that over 15,000 were there in Launceston for, I think it was the first ever Friday night primetime game there. And the third straight 3-point meeting between the Hawks and Crows there, because 2021, you had Riley Philthorpe's 5 straight on debut and Hawthorn still winning despite Adelaide's insane accuracy. Then in 2023, I think it was also Anzac weekend. That year was a late Darcy Fogarty goal from a tight angle that won the Crows that one. This had the thrill because it was a close contest throughout, but
This was not fun.
and we're not saying that because of our feelings toward Hawthorn mostly. It's that collective scores were 11-25,
And
like Cairns level.
between this and Canberra, there's been a pretty strong case against cold weather footy the last couple of weeks.
It's also just the time of year where there's this dip in quality toward the middle of the season. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I was so hyped up for this game because of what these teams had delivered within this season and in past meetings. And I felt good about that. Like, I was hyping up Philthorpe because of his performances this year and what he'd done on debut there. He was goalless. The tolls for Adelaide were no goals 7 combined. The conditions just didn't favor tolls. Dan Curtin had an early marking presence, but that was kind of it. And then they didn't use Curtin nearly as much from there. That's a damn shame.
This was a 31-16 game at halftime, and it felt like the Crows should have been up more. I mean, kicking 4-7 will leave you feeling like you should be up more.
Expected score favored them by over 14 points when it was all said and done.
And it felt like they just had every opportunity to run away with this thing and didn't. Halftime expected score was 53-20.
Was this just a Friday the 13th horror show?
Kind of.
Is Friday the 13th considered auspicious in Australia?
I don't know. I've always thought that's dumb.
I don't know. I mean, it's no Thursday the 20th.
Good reference.
What is it in Italy again? You learned this.
Seems Friday the 17th.
I think a lot of the highlights for this game were defensive, and I mean, that's not just because of the lower scores. Jarman Impey had an important role containing and starting rebounds pretty much throughout the game. Jordan Butts had his best defensive game in a long while in the other 50, and that was really necessary to keep the game close. Mark Keane was decent, but I'd say the highlight of Adelaide's defense was definitely Jordan Butts.
I think from a watchability standpoint, Mitch Hinge was great if you had no investment in this game.
Of course we did.
Yeah, like if you just
This was unhinged.
if you just want chaos, this was like the perfect Mitch Hinge game.
Wait, we haven't even seen Sam Frost this year, have we?
We did early in the year. Wasn't he out of sub now a couple times?
Oh yeah, he was the sub for opening round in round 1. But yeah, haven't seen him since then. He hasn't registered a mark this year. So I think we're transitioning fully from Frostball to unhinged.
I hope that this catches on because there were some really wacky turnovers and stuff just that should not be happening in an AFL game.
It wasn't just him, but his was probably the most prominent.
I think my favorite moment from him was where he got caught holding the ball by Sam Butler, who's been quite good in this couple of games for the Hawks. Then got called for a delay 50 that I don't think was... But no, that was one of the more reasonable 50s. There were a couple of really bad ones. And then he headbutts Dylan Moore in the shoulder of all places. Like, this is fun because he's just doing things that humans don't do.
That's where you should have gotten 100 there. It was in a Western Derby a couple years back where he had 150 meters at once. It involved Caleb Sarong.
It's just like, of all the places to headbutt someone, the shoulder is not a smart one.
No. Wouldn't you drive him right into the chest cavity instead?
Just, I mean, I think the funniest thing would be to inflict maximum pain and avoid damage yourself. Well, it would be difficult to pull off headbutting someone in the groin. Stomach's doable too.
Yeah. Headbutting someone in the groin is like almost a reverse pile driver.
But
yeah,
it's stupid. There were a couple of really bad calls. This was umpiring really swung to Hawthorn in the second half. I think first half, the free kick counted favored Adelaide pretty heavily. I don't have the exact number on me.
I still do not believe, though, that the umpires have swung the result of any one game this year. You may disagree.
I think they had more of a hand in this than the Crows still pissed this away themselves.
Which is kind of a return on investment from last week. Darcy Fogarty had an insufficient intent call on him that people were really mad about. That call was correct. You cannot spoil to the boundary outside of, a direct contest and once the ball hits the ground. That was right.
The worst one was this 50 on Curtin for putting the ball down in front of Sam Butler instead of handing it to him. Like, then you're just nitpicking. That's really unnecessary.
Ball didn't lie, though.
But still, like, it helped swing play down to that side of the field.
It was already, I think things were trending Hawthorne's way by that point anyway. Like, I don't know.
So people were mad about what? The Fogarty fist out on full that led to the go-ahead goal?
Which was a correct call.
Yeah, that was a correct call. It was just a stupid play.
I mean, we'd seen that happen. Might have been Jeremy Howe doing that either this year or last, and it got a bit of a focus from that.
It was just dumb and unnecessary.
Highlights for Hawthorne, aside from Jai Newcomb's game-winning goal and Connor McDonald being the most prominent of the Mosquito fleet, Jack Gunston could have totally claimed this game for his own with more accurate kicking, but it did feel fitting with all that involvement that he had and him being a former Crow that he had the final assist for Newcomb.
I thought this was despite the difficulty in scoring, one of Dylan Moore's better games.
Oh, his fourth quarter was easily the best. He was the best contested player on the night as a whole. 11 contested possessions, even split there. Still over 78% efficient. 13 tackles as well. Just kind of the player most with it for Hawthorne all game. And in the fourth, he actually got his hand on the Sharon Moore and impacted things there. I want to say like 4 maybe of his 5 score involvements were in the fourth quarter. Also, how did Dunstan and Newcomb have that kind of space on that final goal? Was ball watching from the Crows. I was surprised that Lloyd Meek didn't totally get the better of Riley O'Brien. Like, O'Brien held up in the second half, though, and he's doing all right auditioning for his job.
The last month plus, O'Brien's done a really good job as a whole.
His marking has been better more than anything else. He's not just kind of a hit ball ruck right now. And I know that a number of teams are looking at him. I think Brisbane was mentioned in there. Have there been rumblings about Geelong as well? I think, yeah. I don't think he would really solve Geelong's problems, though.
No,
that would be just like moving on from Reece Stanley with something that's
similar, but a bit of a bigger body. I don't think that would solve a lot. Honestly, I would rather, if you're not going to go really big, and make a huge splash with a Luke Jackson,
then just prey on Toby Conway's health.
Maybe just, you bring in someone like a Todd Goldstein just as a depth piece.
I just say pray that Conway's healthy.
He just might be tracking towards one of those what ifs.
Sadly. Other highlights for Adelaide. Isaac Cumming had a strong outside game, but given the circumstances, Adelaide's defeat, that's going to go underreported.
I think you could make a case that he was the best midfielder in this game, period, even with what Newcomb did as the game went on.
I mean, I guess he's listed as a wing, so yeah, that makes sense. His marking was always pretty solid. Ben Keys had a couple goals in his 150th game and was one of the more visible pros. Again, just this result frustrates me. And the jumper clash frustrated me as well because I was totally expecting the Crows to wear dark blue, and I think that would have worked a bit better.
That didn't bother me. Just my thing with this game and with the Crows as a whole right now is we haven't seen them pick up a really big road win.
And they tend to have Brisbane's number at home. I don't think any of their wins have surprised us this year.
They've beaten good teams at home. They've beaten bad teams on the road, but I have not seen them really pick up a big win outside of the Adelaide Oval. I mean, the struggles against Freo, that would have even been a significant one. What have they done on the road this year?
They've beat Essendon, a 1-point loss to Gold Coast. Freo, Collingwood is always winnable for them, but
blowing out the Swans was nice, but that was a Swans team that really looked like ass, let's be real.
Not gonna lie, I want Richmond to beat them off the bye.
I don't
And-
think that happens.
I don't either. However, Mark Bickley was the guy who said, "Oh, Richmond's not going to win a single game this year."
Oh, then yeah, that would be great.
Bickley being their double premiership captain.
I just need to see this team prove to me that they can win a big road game. And so far, they have not done that.
Am I crazy to say Bulldogs round 18 does not count?
No, that absolutely would count.
I don't know, just because the Bulldogs are the Bulldogs. Really, that's their last chance because their other road games are Richmond, West Coast, and North.
Yeah, I would say then if they can just win one big game outside of Adelaide, I'll feel a lot better about them going into finals. Like I think of, for all the crap the Lions got over their inability to win at the G in past years, they at least would pick up big wins at Marvel and damn near everywhere else.
Yeah, so circle the first game on July 12th, or the night of the 11th for us when the Dogs host Adelaide. That's the one that was relocated from Ballarat to Marvel. So I hope fans do show out for that. But on the topic of the Brisbane Lions, yeah, they can pick up road wins, but the Gabba now hasn't been the kindest to them. They've lost 3 there. Brisbane Lions, 13-18-96, defeated by the Greater Western Sydney Giants, 17-5-107. Another game where Brisbane are going to rue their inaccuracy. They've now had more behinds than goals in 6 games this year. That includes 3 of their 4 losses and their draw against North.
Once again, GWS has been the recipient of opponents performing way below expected score, and I don't think a lot of that's sustainable. So if there's a reason to be concerned about the Giants, that would be it.
I felt good about the Giants entering this game just because of trends, and I'm proven right here. The Giants started with really good pressure. They were forcing Brisbane to handball more than they like and resulted in a bit of a slower play style from the Lions. Really, you saw it in the second quarter in particular, and it did result in 9 scores that quarter, but 4-5. And then their uncontested play dried up in the third quarter. But the real story for Brisbane out of this game was the most unfortunate defensive injury of the year to this point, because Jack Payne is done for the year with a ruptured patellar tendon.
Unit lost.
And we've talked about, I've really said in particular, the tandem that he's formed with Harris Andrews. Ethan Meldrum, Triple M guy, mentioned that Payne has had multiple goals kicked on him in just 2 games this year. And he can just exchange those roles with Andrews so well.
Obviously, replacing a player in-game is a lot harder than replacing a player, when you have a week to do it.
Looks like it's probably going to be Darcy Gardner because he was taken out of their VFL game. So that's a pretty clear sign there, especially on a short turnaround to Geelong.
You'd rather have Payne as your second guy and Lester as your third than Lester as your second and Gardner as your third. It's just a question of how big a drop is it. But within this game, Payne's absence really got exposed. Eric Hipwood was playing a full field role trying to defend Aaron Cadman. And while Hipwood, I loved his full field marking defensively, he got overwhelmed in the coming out party for Aaron Cadman. 5-1 from 19 disposals and 13 marks.
Those are all career highs for him. And he's doing this despite also having 6 goals from Jesse Hogan.
Between just knowing what Hogan already was and Cadman's full field marking, I was even more impressed with Cadman than I was with Hogan in this game. And I obviously really liked both. I mean, I think everyone did.
Yeah, Hogan's performances like this, his bags don't surprise you. We hadn't seen this from Cadman before. I wonder, how much of it came from playing on Hipwood and how much of it was him just rising to the occasion. But the combination of Hogan, Cadman, and Brown, this is the new forward order. They got 14 goals, more than the Lions as a whole, from the combination of Hogan, Cadman, and Brown. Because Brown had 3 of his own.
A couple of really clutch ones in the fourth quarter to help build that lead out. Because this was a 2-point game at 3-quarter time. In fact, Brisbane led until the final minute of the third quarter. And then all of a sudden, the Giants broke out to go up by as much as 26. And then held on with a few more late Brisbane misses. I feel like this is the rare game where someone who's never watched footy before and someone who's watched thousands of games would both agree that the forwards were the best players out there. Logan Morris kicking 5 for the Lions was pretty ridiculous too.
He got under Sam Taylor's skin.
He just beat Sam Taylor. And that's the most frustrating thing to me if you're Brisbane is that you beat Sam Taylor. Jack Buckley was solid, but you beat Sam Taylor and it still wasn't enough to win this game. Normally, if you beat Sam Taylor, you beat the Giants. In fact, most of the Giants' losses come on games where Sam Taylor's still really good because he's just like universally rock solid. And on a rare day where he didn't have it, the Lions still couldn't capitalize, and that's got to be driving them crazy.
Now, we did also learn that Taylor broke his toe, so he's going to be out for 4 to 5 weeks there. Xander McGuire reported he played through the pain despite sustaining the injury in that game. So that could have definitely added to the frustration there. Did Taylor actually give up a 50? Yeah, he did. A late contact 50 on Morris. And Sam Taylor's usually one of the most even-keeled guys out there. But just
technically didn't lose a contested one-on-one. I thought you would have to credit at least 1 or 2 of those. But I think it's more just he wasn't able to contest one-on-ones because he was just physically hampered. He only was credited with 1 of them for the whole game.
But the story wasn't just that the forwards were so capable and that Captain was fucking marking everything, even though, yes, he was. It's that the Giants managed a lot of real tsunami in this game. By 3/4 time, they already had 9 goals from the defensive half and a couple more there in the fourth, too. You got a lot of uncontested ball for a returning Finn Callahan, who started super hot. I mean, we are huge Finn Callahan believers. And he's so structurally important, too, because him returning means Lockie Whitfield was restored to halfback. Callahan finished up with 32 and 2 assists.
And it just means more corridor play in general.
That's even with injuries to Brent Daniels in there, too. It's just whether or not Callahan's getting contested or uncontested, you'll trust him to look inside first. And they had so many fluid passages going through the middle. Like, you had it starting with Callahan, and then sometimes Tom Green would get in there. He had 9 score involvements. Darcy Jones in his helmet had 7.
I think this was pretty obviously the best played game in the round from top to bottom. Like, there were so many good performances that'll go under the radar from both teams in this game.
I have a feeling that one of the ones we should mention for the Giants is Harry Rouston starting his first game in God knows how long, a couple of years. Super involved from the middle. You know, he was assigned to Lockie Neal, and not like he really quieted Neal, but he had enough of his own ball. Rouston, 18 and 6 tackles and an assist.
First half, I really liked Rouston, and then Neal was very good. But you know who kind of mirrored his numbers in terms of score involvements, contested split, and efficiency? Was Tom Green. Tom Green is playing efficient football.
That's terrifying. Like, you don't ever expect Tom Green to be above 70% efficiency, but there he was.
Once again, more than half of his possessions contested. He got to 9 score involvements, 8 inside 50s, 7 center clearances.
He was the biggest reason why the Giants dominated their 7 clearances.
Yeah, he had 11 clearances in all. Lockie Neal had 10.
Clearances as a whole actually favored the Lions in this game, 35-29. But the Giants were +8 from the center, and Tom Green was the biggest reason for that. His clearances and setups in the fourth quarter, I think, was when he was the most impactful.
I thought even though he only had 3 clearances himself, Xavier O'Halloran was really important in that spot as well. You know, O'Halloran's been very, very up and down, and this was an up.
He is a barometer for the Giants in that if he sticks with the game and, you know, has a few involvements, it tends to go pretty well for them. He doesn't have to take over a game, even with all the injuries that they've had.
I also really like Joe Fonte. I thought he was just pretty important in setting things up altogether.
With the asterisk of when he could have gotten a Mark of the Year candidate, but decided to spoil instead. He's got this huge vertical, spoiled, and Brandon Starcevich capitalized. Great to see Starcevich back. That was the biggest crowd reaction probably of the whole game.
Not only back, but yeah, a rare Brandon Starcevich goal. That was very cool. That was like probably the feel-good moment of the round.
Thinking about Brisbane's defense, though, you could see the defensive problems developing even when Payne was out there. They They need to keep their man assignments close, even though Harris Andrews doesn't like doing that. And when you're going up against a three-headed monster, like, again, I'm persisting with this, the new forward order of Australian football, brother, you really have no other option but to play man.
During those late sequences, I thought Connor Iden was really important as well. Couple of huge intercepts and launched a couple from the back. I thought he was one of the more important guys in the tsunami in this game.
He started a decent amount, and then it went up to Callahan. I did actually really got credited with a score launch, I guess.
He got credited with one.
There we go. Find it hard sometimes to see how that's actually judged because you feel like he had more of it. Maybe he was like the second guy to get it after an intercept mark, and maybe that's why it was credited elsewhere. But this was a complete game from the Giants.
You know what I like is that they won this game without an especially strong contribution from Lockie Ash, who had another 10 turnovers.
Looking back at this game as a whole, do you think that this would be a good game to show an initial viewer, or is it like too forward heavy?
I think it's a little too forward heavy.
There was actually a thread about this on Reddit, and, you know, the popular picks were like all-time great games.
Well, yeah, and we've had this discussion, like when we did our episode with Derek. You know, you don't want to just show someone an all-time great game. You want to show them like a conventional good game, like an 80th percentile game or something.
The way we thought of it was like an A- tier game.
Something that's got good late excitement, some swings, some back and forth.
But no absolutely crazy ending and no like one super dominant performance. And you need it to be home and away. Like, I wouldn't even go with a rivalry at first. Like, maybe one of the first 5 games I'd show them would be Showdown 51, which is Dawson after the siren, but that's not your lead off.
That Brisbane Essendon game from a few weeks ago, I thought was a really good one because it looks like it's a blowout and then ends up competitive. I feel like that was a good one to get people interested.
Maybe we could try that one with my friend Max or somebody else in there.
This one was also, I wouldn't include it because it didn't include a Charlie Cameron goal. He was pretty much invisible. You know who one last thing on this game for me. You know who I really liked in the sub role for the Giants again, as a guy who, despite being such a young player, has made some really just like important 1%er type knock-on plays, is Josiah Delana. I mean, he did the same in the win at Geelong. This game was actually very similar to that in a lot of respects.
Delano was actually the lowest rated player in this game because of low kick efficiency. I think the fact that he missed his shot on goal probably contributed to that. I do want to see him get into action more, though. 3 marks and 7 disposals in his limited time. He's one to watch for sure.
I think he plays a really important role just in terms of making some like really refined plays at higher speed. And just, he has really good football sense, especially for such a young player.
Also, with Sam Taylor out for about a month, it's going to be real time to shine for Lecalier because he's going to get higher profile assignments. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, Lecalier's greatest moment yet in the AFL was against Geelong. And Geelong would not be stopped in the country game. Like, I feel bad for Essendon just because you knew it could get this bad. At least they didn't lose by triple digits. But this was the biggest margin of 2025 so far, as Essendon 8-8-56 were completely outdone by Geelong 23-13, 151. Essendon had their 9th and 10th debutants for the year, 2 midseason picks in Lachlan Blackiston and Archer May. And while I liked May, Blackiston was put into a really tough role right away.
He kind of had to wear this one.
Yeah, he got welcomed to the AFL by Shannon Neal.
I can't really fault him, you know. He got thrown into such a tough spot. And to give him credit, he competed through all 4 quarters, which you might not necessarily be able to say about a fair amount of their guys. This kind of went how a lot of Geelong Essendon games have gone, where it's just like every time you go forward, you're expecting a goal pretty much.
Geelong were comfortable with pushing the pace by hand from the jump. I wondered if they were just trying to tire out. a less experienced Essendon side? If so, that worked. Essendon still was able to get out on rebounds, but they weren't clean enough to punish from them enough. And rebound defense is still the biggest worrisome spot for Geelong, but it didn't end up mattering. They blew out the game even further in a third quarter. There was actually 7-5, but it felt like there was no going back even from then. They played on for well over half their marks, and yeah, they tired Essendon out.
Late in the second quarter was that stretch of like, okay, Essendon's made a push here the last couple weeks, got to hold them off here, and not letting them get back-to-back goals going into halftime was huge because Matt Guelphy did get one off of a Zach Merritt intercept, but that was all they got. And then after they got the first goal of the third quarter to cut it to 29 off of one by Peter Wright, who was one of the few bright spots for the Bombers, Blackiston couldn't take an intercept mark, and then Max Holmes finished one. He had a pretty fantastic day. Bailey Smith, 41 disposals, 765 meters gained, 2 assists. Despite only a quarter of his possessions being contested, he was below 60% efficiency and had 10 turnovers, which is fine, because really just what Geelong needs out of Bailey Smith is not this super refined outing. You know, you just need him to kind of fly around and compete for balls in the midfield, and he did that. And that allowed other guys to really thrive, including Max Holmes, who nearly broke champion data. You know, typically the highest player rating goes somewhere into the low to mid 20s, maybe the high 20s.
36.5.
Now, I know champion data doesn't always get it right, as I've said many times, like how they value guys who kind of just rack up possessions, but Max Holmes was absolutely worthy of this. He also had 21 pressure acts and 13 ground ball gets if we're looking at the more advanced numbers. If we're looking at the more basic numbers, a goal from 36 disposals, 8 clearances, 871 meters gained, an assist, 7 score involvements, 7 intercepts, about 40% of his possessions contested, somewhere between a third and 2/5, and over 80% efficiency. This was one of the best individual performances of the entire season. I love that we could go this far and not even mention that Jeremy Cameron once again kicked 6, because this is what, the 4th time now this year he's kind of piled on late. Well, he was kind of piling on all day, but he's done a really good job of pouring it on to help boost percentage and boost himself in the Brownlow count. You know, he had that awesome game against the Bulldogs that was down to the wire, but like other than that, his big bags have come blowout against Freo, blowout against Port, pull away late against the Eagles, and now this, which I'm totally fine with.
After being goalless against the Suns, and, you know, that being one of his least involved games of the entire year, otherwise, in his past 5, aside from that, 7, 6, 5, and 6. It's a kind of expected carnage, but it's carnage nonetheless. And with Geelong having a very soft schedule coming home compared to other top contenders as well, you feel good about him probably sticking with the Coleman race, if not winning the damn thing, because they still have Richmond to play twice, and North, and an Essendon rematch. Now, they do host the Lions this coming week, and then round 18, they go to the Giants. Now, Sam Taylor's injury means that would be the earliest possible return for him, maybe. But again, like Alir has done things before.
I mean, tough remaining games include this Friday, and then 2 trips to New South Wales, and we'll see how pesky the Saints and Power can be, but it's definitely a generous-looking schedule the rest of the way. As good as Cameron was, I was even happier to see Shannon Neal kick 4 and rack up 9 marks. He's learning how to use his hands and growing up all of a sudden. The numbers didn't love him, but I thought Lawson Humphreys was really sharp, kind of affecting things on both wings. He actually kicked a goal as well, 19 disposals and 8 marks. And, you know, one of the concerns with this team was going to be clearances, even with Bailey Smith. They ended up -2 in clearances for the game, but I thought they did enough to make sure that there were very few times, unlike in past years, where it would be, you know, a clearance immediately leading to an inside 50 and goal.
It's more the rebound defense, as I've said.
Yeah. You know, Jai Caldwell was pretty good. He had 10 tackles, an octopus, that is, and 8 clearances.
Thank you.
But one of the biggest factors in limiting Essendon from really getting off at clearance was the combo of Oisin Mullen and Mark O'Connor. Now, that's something where not having to face Sam Durham definitely doesn't hurt. Mullen helped limit Zach Merritt. O'Connor helped limit Nick Martin. And the biggest thing there to me was just like there were a couple of times, even if O'Connor himself didn't have a clearance and Mullen himself only had one, like they were involved in center bounces a lot in kind of taking away what Essendon wanted to do. Merritt only had 4 for the game.
Our polished turd did not go to Caldwell, did not go to Will Setterfield despite his octopus. It went to, well, he's a bit taller than 2 meters. Not Snakebite Peter White.
Yeah, I thought he was one of the sharper players for Essendon, one of the only talls that did much. Sam DeConing was playing really well until he got hurt. He had a wrist thing in the second quarter, and then in the third, suffered an AC joint injury that's going to keep him out like 4 to 5 weeks. Would be nice to have him back for GWS, but that isn't imperative. I feel like that's the biggest game you'd miss him for.
I don't want to say it's imperative, but I think it would require a steadier back roll for Mark Blitzofs to make up for him.
Yeah, but also just, Tom Stewart playing better, Jack Henry continuing to do his thing. Remember, Hogan's huge bag last time came without Jack Henry in the equation.
Right, thank you.
So, that is a dent in the tall stocks defensively, but again, you can slide Blitzovs around. That's the beauty of Mark Blitzovs. He can play everywhere. And
I think he was a steeplechaser.
Yeah, former steeplechaser. Like, if you had to pick other negatives, the rebound defending, and then, Reece Stanley kind of got outdone by Todd Goldstein, but that wasn't of great significance. Stanley actually had a couple of pretty good moments elsewhere on the O-hole.
It is also just cool to see that Todd Goldstein can still be with it at times because it's Todd Goldstein. You gotta love him. I gotta say, though, one thing that I like about Geelong and one thing that I enjoy, and it goes into my enjoyment of Australian rules football as a whole, is that there's incentive just to keep running up the score. And I feel like every team but Carlton understands this. The Cats have now won 13 of their 14 fourth quarters with a percentage of nearly 270. Thank you, Glicko, for that. And that also contributed to Essendon having a worse percentage than North now. And I bet North fans are lapping it up because it's Brad Scott coaching Essendon.
It's also really funny because Essendon have owned North for nearly a decade now.
North will take wins where they get them, as we'll talk about right after the break.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did. How did you know that number, Ethan? Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters. Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed. It's so easy you can edit it while drunk. And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more just like we do. Best of all, it's completely free. Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
And welcome back to Americans Watching the Footy. This is episode number 244, which means, of course, it's the 244th episode.
I thought we were going to go with try about a player who's played that number of games, but 244. That was the number of Jim Steins' Ironman streak, right?
That sounds right. I don't know.
I believe so. He's Ethan at Castle Media on Twitter. That's Castle with a K.
He's Benjamin at BenjaminHK01. Our executive producer is just chilling on the bed. He is on Instagram at CatNameDryan.
Collectively, we are on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, and who knows where else in the future at Americans Footy. I know where else we won't be. Red Note or TikTok. I totally forgot about Red Note. That was popular for a day. 4 games down, 3 to go.
I've only really watched one of these 3 in full, and I think these as a whole probably merit a bit less analysis than the ones we were talking about earlier. Isn't that fair to say?
I would say so, and it's definitely, I would say it was the most compelling of the games, even though it might not have been the highest skilled of the 3. North 10-7-67 defeated by Fremantle 10-13-73, which feels weird to say because this was at Optus, all that. Only 31,000 or so went to this game. Why was Fremantle the one that had the Optus game instead of Bunbury? They should reverse that for next year.
I mean, I've already said my piece on selling games. Like, I'd rather you do it to somewhere that doesn't have games, period. Like Cairns or even Townsville. I'm fully supportive of that.
I think there's only been one AFL game ever in Townsville.
And that was in 2020. I remember watching it.
I thought it was 2019.
But I guess swear there was also one there in 2020. Maybe not. Maybe it was just multiple Cairns games that I'm thinking.
There were definitely multiple Cairns games in 2020. There were 4 of them.
With Geelong's post-game live and then me being tired, I did not watch a ton of this game, but I can give you what I did get out of it, and then I'll let Benjamin take it from there. 5-1 second quarter put Freo up by 21 at the half. Most of the middle quarters were just sloppy, ugly, wet weather footy, and then North made it interesting late, but couldn't come all the way back.
North have at least been able to fight back in a decent amount of fourth quarters, which is nice. They're actually playing out full games.
Yeah, really, since getting absolutely pantsed on Good Friday, I mean, they've been competitive in pretty much, every game except one. And even that, the Collingwood game, they were competitive for a half and within striking distance on the scoreboard until the fourth, although that was more because of Collingwood's inaccuracy. But if you're giving us one stinker per 2 months, that's no worse than a lot of teams. And that is progress for North.
And hey, their percentage is above Essendon's.
Which, again, hilarious.
Absolutely. North had high pressure from the beginning, and Luke Davies-Uniacke was absolutely everywhere to start. He had 4 clearances, 9 disposals, and a goal in a flash. A lot of that was thanks to Tristan Jerry easily beating Sean Darcy. That enabled a lot of their early stoppage success. That's how North got their first 3 goals. Jackson was the one to stabilize things at the ruck. It wasn't surprising that Freo capitalized on rebounds because that just isn't surprising against an inferior list.
I mean, I guess what's surprising there is just that them continuing to take the initiative to utilize their speed.
They're using their speed, a bit of their size too. Josh Tracy was clearly winning against Toby Pink all game.
That's also unsurprising.
Yeah, I wasn't sure though if he wanted to keep pushing that upfield or if he should have gone deeper. He didn't end up having a goal in this game. However, I think just his continued marking presence mattered. And if you're not going to impact the scoreboard, you're going to at least have to do that. Good on Tracy for staying involved even when he couldn't do so in his real preferred manner. Then the rain definitely started having more of an effect on the proceedings. You saw that really from, I'd say, late in the second quarter. It was still surprising though that Freo got their run with speed as the rain increased. And then the second half, that movement was non-existent, partially because of a North fight back. I don't think they were, particularly trying to play more slowly. I don't think they were trying to change what worked for the first half, considering it was, only a 4-goal game at the break, 3.5 if you want to be precise. This was another game that I really liked from Stan Switkowski, just one of the cleaner players, and as the rain increased, that was increasingly important. And then he did his hamstring in the fourth. What was it? Last week, we also highlighted Switkowski as one of the best, yeah?
Yeah, he was great in that game.
I guess there are a lot of similarities between that game and this one, then, with Switkowski having been clean and Bolton just dynamic. His high efforts always visible. As is not surprising with a Fremantle win, big numbers for the main 2 in the midfield. How about 36 and Octopus at 8 clearances for Sarong, and 31, 9 tackles and 9 clearances for Andrew Rayshaw. Them getting into 30s is pretty much a sign they're going to win. We went over those sorts of trends last time, so check our progress reports for what we said there. That's, I guess, our previous episode. North had a lot of positive trends later on, kept up pressure, more forward half intercepts, more of tackles inside 50. They just did not hit the scoreboard enough. I wanted to be frustrated by North, I guess, and I was, even though they had that run of goals and a bit more accuracy in the fourth with Constanti, a couple from Larkey, and then Parker, dried up for the last 10 minutes or so. I don't know. I wanted Freo to win this game. I think that was very clear. We discussed this, right?
Yeah, and that's just exclusively because of the location aspect.
Yeah, just don't sell games to other teams' home venues. This also just felt super awkward to see Freo playing at Optus, not against West Coast. Freo in their purple, and just, there was a rocker on the roof-sized gap in the festivities. And they still had some of their same music, though, so it felt like a weird, almost neutral vibe.
Almost as if it's gather round, but it wasn't, and it was also like half empty.
Maybe. I do think we'll get a Western gather round at some point, and it won't work as well as in South Australia.
Oh, I think it'll be a massive success.
The problem is just Adelaide is much more accessible.
Yeah, so I just think for the Western fans, I think it'll be a huge success.
No, I mean, that's why I think it's going to happen. And so you'd see games, obviously, mostly at Optus, but Bunbury would definitely get one or two. Actually, where would the other be? Like the bigger waffle ovals, I guess.
Yeah, you could upgrade something. I'm sure something would get upgraded.
I mean, Mineral Resources Park, where the Eagles have their waffle, and also the Perth Demons are there too. That can hold, I think at times that's held up to 20,000.
Yeah, so there are options.
I really do think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm totally open to it. We weren't open to this specific version of selling games.
North showed some late life with their runs from the back half. And I like the impact, once again, that Rob Hansen Jr. had as a sub.
I remember liking him in their prior game as well, which was... What game even was that?
Yeah, you don't want to remember Bunbury either. How about 3 goal assists as a sub?
I do remember from the bits of this I had on in the background as I was falling asleep. I do remember, you mentioned Constanti, and I remember him being significant.
Yeah, he had the first goal for North in the fourth quarter, but Hansen he was involved on the wing, then got a couple more centrally, so he's moving around the width of the ground really well. So I want to see him get that next step into the 22, and I think there's no better time to do that than now.
Oh, I saw a fun stat from, I forget which Instagram account. Was it Sench? Let me check. It was not. But it was comparing David Mundy and Scott Pendlebury and the amount of distance they've had to travel for games.
Pendlebury, he plays for Collingwood, so that's kind of a given. Whereas Mundy, I believe, had been to the moon.
I promise you it's out there, and it was like a staggering number. How did Freo hold on at the end?
There was some stronger marking there. Pat Voss had a one-hander that I noted. Josh Tracy went back and had the last intercept mark against Jack Darling, then kicked it out on the full. And then on the last stoppage, Andrew Brayshaw tackled Caleb Daniel to put things away. Luke Ryan also really manned up for a tackle on Nick Larkey a bit before that. I think there was pretty much a universal surprise there for a play-on call. But I don't know, not a lot of this game actually surprised me after just Freo kind of had their run halted in the early third quarter. The guys that you would expect to lift, I think, did. And yeah, I did call Hansen being good as a sub because we'd seen it in Bunbury. Like, I'm not sure if there's much that's really going to change your mind about North in this game. Another 32, 3 clearances and 6 tackles for Harry Sheasel. I guess maybe the fact that he's tackling more is going to please you. And I know you've been more positive about Dylan Stevens in recent times. 8 intercepts, 4 score involvements, and an assist as part of Stevens' 27. Like, Stevens, he said, kind of fits North's profile right now.
Yeah, not necessarily going to be a guy who's going to be, on contending teams, but at least helps elevate the floor. Could be, a role player on a contending team in a couple of years. I could actually see that.
I guess the one real surprise, two surprises for North, Cam Zerhar goalless and Jai Simpkin limited to 11.
Wow. Whose responsibility was that?
Not sure if there was a real responsibility or if it was just wins at the source for Sarong and Brayshaw. And with the game being played a lot more in Freo's forward half, the higher disposal numbers went to Sheasel, McKercher, McDonald. Davies Uniacke still had his 27. A lot of that came early, though. And I think also Tom Powell having a more prominent role on ball, 7 clearances from his 23, took the emphasis off Simpkin a bit more. You've got the pieces to let Simpkin go to a different spot on the oval and let him be maybe a bit more center half forward with Sheasel, Wardlaw, and Powell all playing well. Wardlaw with 6 clearances. So I want to see how they deploy Simpkin and maybe switch that up as North go into the back part of the year. Port Adelaide 14-9-93, defeating Melbourne 9-14-68. Oh, look, Demons and accuracy, costing them again. They did also lose on expected score, I'll say, by little over 13 points. Hit it.
13!
What stands out? Port had goals after the siren in the first 3 quarters.
Port deserved to win this game. They had the better individual performances and the better team performance. Really, a couple of guys standing up in each 50. Mitch Georgiadis in the forward half was pretty remarkable. He finished 7-4 from 18 disposals, 10 marks.
If he had a compass, he would have been able to beat his father's debut, because his dad, John, had a pretty short VFL career before going back home to the West. But on debut for Footscray in 1989, he kicked 8. And Mitch had every reason to maybe even hit 10 in this game. And then we could have really talked about it, but we'll mention it here again. You should invade the Oval for 10 goals.
The rationale there, I've said, 100 goals in the season seems highly unlikely to ever happen in today's game. Same with 1,000 for the career. So, 10 in a game, I think, deserves it.
Also, it would keep people interested in blowouts.
Yeah, that's the other thing is 10 is usually only going to happen in blowouts. This was not a blowout. This was actually, before that, after the siren goal going to the fourth, just a 9-point game. So that last goal was really interesting. That 3 after the siren goals, but this one, Sam Powell-Pepper gets Jack Viney holding the ball. Could have been a dangerous tackle, but I think there was at least an argument that Viney kind of threw his own head into the ground. Then Viney gets popped for a delay of game 50, and Powell-Pepper gets the goal. Darcy Byrne-Jones kicks one early in the fourth. Then Georgiadis makes it 6 and 7, and that puts the game out of reach.
Georgiadis was the story in the forward 50 for Port.
The story defensively was Asava Radigalea with one of the best games of his career.
One of?
Probably the best. 12 intercepts, 13 marks in all, nearly 90% disposal efficiency, even with more than 2/3 being contested, 18 disposals, 8 intercept marks, and 6 spoils.
7 of those intercept marks were in the first half. I wonder if he got a stern threat from Gill afterward. We've mentioned this, right, Ethan? This year?
The record is 10, and it can never exceed 10.
Gill's personally going to take out whoever gets to 11. And considering he's from South Australia, I wouldn't be shocked if he were close by enough to make that threat.
Player ratings are so interesting for this game because of Georgiadis' misses. He's actually kind of middle of the pack. Talk rated player, and I disagree with this. I mean, he was good, but I didn't think he was great. At least he had a very good first half, was Kazi Pickett, and then Asava was Port's best, and I would agree. I mean, it's clearly between Asava and Georgiadis.
Georgiadis was the first player to even kick 6 goals in a game where both Stephen May and Jake Lever were playing for Melbourne. But this is also an indictment of the fact that they had Daniel Turner on it to start. Georgiadis is the top forward there for Port. That's been established. He was their leading goal kicker last year. With their lack of depth there too, even with Charlie Dixon in the rooms pre-game, there was no question that your attention should have been on Mitchell John Georgiadis. And yet you had your third option on him. Turner's a good mark and is versatile, but he's too small and he's just not experienced enough 1v1.
I mean, at that point, it also probably didn't help that Georgiadis was buzzing along and had all his confidence going. Maybe it's different if May's on him from the start, but May was also not fast enough for that matchup.
And the last thing Melbourne wants is a pissed off Stephen May, for their own sake.
He seemed to handle himself better in this game for what it's worth.
He did enable Georgiadis' 7th with a 50 for a late tackle.
I mean, it was probably going to be a goal anyway.
Still, though, it was hilarious. But you were talking about Kazi. With his first 11 disposals, he had 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 score involvements, and 2 clearances. That was all by early in the second quarter. He went down for an HIA before halftime and was hardly involved after that. I don't think there's anything that suggests there's something lingering from there, but it's a watch.
Yeah, Port did a good job holding him in check the rest of the way and just had the better midfield performance in addition to being better in both 50s. I thought this was a very nice return for Jason Horne-Francis.
Here he is again, the horny one.
Combine that with one of Willem Drew's better games.
Well, Horne-Francis, I know he's nursing a bit of a shoulder issue now. They still say he's likely to play this week. Clearly, has shoulder compromised as we're looking at the training footage. Melbourne had a red-hot start at clearance, 13 of the first 15, but Port ended up just -5 for the game. Horne-Francis, the biggest part of that was 7. Actually, he was the only player to even get more than 5.
And also, I thought the moment that really changed momentum in this game was the back-to-back goals off of an undisciplined moment for Melbourne.
And it was not Stephen May.
No, it was not. So, first off, it was the best end-to-end sequence of the round, maybe of the whole year, where Connor Rosie gets back at the last second to grab an intercept mark that prevents a Jake Melksham goal. Then they switch through Jace Burgoyne. Zach Butters goes down the right side. Sam Powell-Pepper hits Willie Rioli against Judd McVie. Rioli plays on for the right snap. And at the same time, McVie then goes and gets into it with Mitch Georgiadis, gives up a free kick off the ball, second goal. That's 2 goals in 16 seconds of clock time, and the lead is out to 13.
13!
McVie had already been under the microscope after bumping Joe Richards.
McVie had a few moments in this game, his temper got the best of him at times.
Did not get suspended for that bump against Richards.
I thought it was in that gray area. I didn't have a strong opinion about that call in either direction.
Yeah, they were talking about bracing for impact there, and he didn't leave the ground. But he was under the microscope, as I said, and temper got the best of him. It's good for his sake that he's got a week to collect himself here with the bye. Just don't go to a steakhouse with Stephen May and Jake Melksham.
That moment, though, was just one that they really didn't recover from. Horn Francis got a goal with a minute left in the half, and then Jace Burgoyne, who had a really up and down game, had one of his up moments with a nice 1-2 with Ollie Wines on the wing. And then Stephen May held Mitch Georgiadis. Georgiadis gets the goal right after the halftime siren, which I think was number 4 for him. And yeah, at that point, it was 60-36. And while Melbourne did make things interesting, that really stood out as you continue to watch this as just the double goal off of the McVie free kick as the moment that really yanked this game and completely flung momentum around.
Port punished turnovers a good deal better. Jason Horn-Francis's goal shortly before halftime was off one as well. There he is again, the horny one. So great to have him back in addition to most other things firing for Port. And I mean, when he's in there, it also takes the weight even more off Rosie and he can play wherever he wants. He did push into the midfield, especially in the fourth quarter. And then Miles Bergman went back from there. Bergman was excellent early also. A goal from
the way Miles Bergman has played going back even through some of the stretches where Port struggled, going back to showdown even.
A goal and 2 assists from 22 for Bergman, 7 marks, getting trusted with more and more time in the midfield. And when you hear the talk about him and the Saints, it's like, man, this is the dynamic player that could totally liven up a Sakilda team. I'm liking the thought of a Saints team with him and Lecalier. This was in many respects a typical Melbourne game. If you look at the last 4 years, low pressure to start with. Port had 39 uncontested marks in the first quarter.
Melbourne actually did have some really good pressure in the second quarter.
Yeah, a response there, but it wasn't as consistent, continuously bad from set shots. They were never their best going long down the line, yet they do it all the time. My other question is just about Ed Langdon, because Langdon did obviously tag Nick Dacos the week before. I get why you don't want him to tag. And I said I don't like him to tag because of how Melbourne lose their outside run with him. And Langdon, could still look inward, inward handballs could still be important for Langdon.
And that's where using Xavier Lindsay as the sub. Now, he had a couple down games, and I totally get moving him into the sub role. But moving Lindsay to the sub definitely kind of limited what you could do with Langdon as well.
But when you're also looking at tagging, you have all of Butters, Horn, Francis, and Rosie to deal with. Clayton Oliver did have 26 and 6 tackles, but it's not like he had a real steady tag role. I feel like a combination of stronger defensive play from Langdon and Oliver could have really gone a long way here.
I think that's where you really need Xavier Lindsay or Caleb Windsor to really take on that wing role if you're going to move Langdon.
And they can. I'm a big believer in both of them. I've said it for Windsor now for a year plus.
Windsor had some decent wing sequences. He was one of the better positives.
Defensively, Blake Howes was more with it this game, 7 marks and 6 tackles. I think his role in the defensive 50 could have even been a bit more magnified. I think maybe he could have had a steadier job on someone like Horn Francis even when he pushed forward, because Horn Francis he had a chance for this to be a nearly all-time game for him. He had 3 early misses. Even though, he's not going to probably be a top 2 guy in our votes for this game, even though, we haven't really formulated stuff as of now. Like I don't know, I'm thinking like that Isaac Heaney game this year where Heaney kicked 2-5. Just like being everywhere but not finishing.
They went with the 2-ruck approach.
That's just the second time that Dante Vicentini and Jordan Sweet have played together, and 2-0. The other one was closing round last year to deny Frio finals.
And I thought Vicentini actually did a really good job limiting the impact from Max Gawn, who, had numbers, but it never seemed like he was, like, oh my God, it's Max Gawn. He's, dominating this game. I actually really liked how Vicentini played.
And guess what? We're getting double Vicentini in round 15.
Not against each other, but double Vicentini.
Yeah, because Vigo is going to be Essendon's 11th player to debut this year. But this is a game where a lot of Melbourne fans just thought this is like so typical for the Goodwin era.
Just the lack of discipline, the structure that probably didn't fit the game.
The high kicks, the inaccuracy, looking too much down the line. Like at this point, they might have more faith in Craig Goodwin leading the team than Simon.
West Coast 7-10-52, defeated by Carlton 12-14-86. Terrible first quarter from the Eagles, completely buried them. And I guess wasn't really ever competitive after that. Although it did seem like Tom McCarthy got really positive reviews from everything I've seen.
McCarthy with 31 disposals on debut, that is an Eagles record. And it's not just an empty 31. He was really active in the back 2/3, also had an assist, 6 marks, 3 score involvements, 9 intercepts. He got back to rush a couple behinds as well. He looked ready right away.
Sorry, when I think of records, my favorite, right?
Like disposal records?
No, just something else.
Debut records?
Nareda Volquez's 8-yard gain is the longest play in Toronto history in almost a decade.
The Tim Tebow Chronicles.
Yes, if you've never read it, and if you're fascinated about a very realistic depiction of how Canada works and Canadian football, please read the Tim Tebow CFL Chronicles.
People are going to be so confused by that, but that's kind of how we like it. Now, the Eagles only lost 1 quarter. They drew the second, and they won the third and fourth by a goal each. It's just that the quarter that they lost was by 39. Typical of the Blues could get out to this early start, and then it's not even parking the bus, it's just not being able to keep up, which is really depressing for any team that is considered near finals. It's just yikes. The other thing, just looking back at these notes, holy cow, there are a lot of initials on these notes. There's a lot of shared names. I had to note H. Reed for Harley because Archer was out of this game, so I include him in the report. You had 2 Hewitts, you had 2 Cripps, you had 3 Williams, and all 3 of them kicked goals.
Only one McGovern, though.
That might be permanent. We might find out this week on him and also on Jeremy McGovern and also on Nick Cox. The Blues were 5-2 from the defensive half in the first half, and most of that was in the first quarter. The one piece of midfield resistance throughout was Liam Ryan. Elijah Hewitt started getting into more of it in the second, but he was clearly the inferior Hewitt. George keeping up his excellent year, a ball magnet, a consistent contest winner. He was a big reason why the Blues were beating their opposition to pretty much every ball, at least in the earlier part of the proceedings. Eagles did get better territory in the third. That's where Liam Ryan and Elijah Hewitt had their better moments. Harley more involved too. But it was not a gripping watch. I mean, there were 6 goals in the second half.
But Carlton, it seems like, did what they needed to, never let it get.
They just the needful early. Oscar Allen got hurt. Plantaro's injury. It's right by the soleus. It's near the Achilles. So that's why there was concern that it was Achilles, especially because it's non-contact. They're labeling it right now as medium term, which is a very Geelong way to approach things.
Yeah, when Geelong does that, people lose their shit. But when the Eagles do it, okay.
I hope he didn't get back. I hope there's a reason for him to stick around, but it sounds like the Eagles are willing to let him go for compensation, which is depressing. Carlton still left a lot on the board. I mean, expected score had them winning by about 10 points more than they actually did. But this game was not exciting. At least you had a game where both George Hewitt and Adam Chera were firing, which is nice. 14 marks for Jacob Wiedering, only 3 intercept marks.
3 votes, Patrick Cripps.
For the record, he had 21. Nothing special at all.
All right, who's your best?
George Hewitt is the one that consistently stood out to me. Only 2 turnovers for him, was the best at ground level. 7 clearances, which were a game high. 9 score involvements, tied for a game high, along with Lockie Fogarty, who got 3 early goals, and Alex Chinkata.
So I just looked at the AFL's Brownlow predictor, and it does not have Cripps getting 3. It does have Hewitt getting 3.
Does Cripps get any?
No.
Is Chera in there then?
No.
Tom DeConing.
Tom DeConing 2.
And the one to Wiedering?
Harley Reid.
Really? I mean, he's a polished candidate, I guess. But I mean, I'd say McCarthy there probably. Harley, 5 clearances, 2 behinds from 28. I mean, he stuck with it. That's good.
It's funny, DeConing didn't even crack the coaches' votes at all.
Strange. Well, I look forward to you giving feedback when you watch this, but I think it's time for us to get toward the awards.
You want me to just do them all at once?
You knew exactly what I was going for. Excellent.
Okay, Mark of the Week. Let's start there. Last week it was Jordan Dawson marking a Max Michelini kick in the pack. His knee was in Riley Filthorpe's back, and it allowed him to kick the go-ahead goal, which definitely carries some extra weight.
Big crowd reaction for that one. I almost regret that they cut away from that first angle so quickly to show the crowd, but it was a hype moment. I can imagine what it felt like at the ground. I enjoyed that one from Newark Airport.
This week, we've got Isaac Cumming tipping and marking one-handed against Massimo D'Ambrosio. D'Ambrosio was kind of locking up his right arm. We've got Aaron Cadman with his left knee on Eric Hipwood's left shoulder. We've got Josh Tracy with his left knee on Toby Pink's right shoulder. Benjamin, where do you go with this?
Tracy might have had a bit of a cleaner take, but I think Cadman had more work to do on that play. I think it's also just part of Cadman and the new forward order. So I'm just so keen on seeing Cadman continue doing well. I think I'll give it narrowly to Cadman over Tracy.
I'm going to go Cadman over Cumming, and I'm going to do that because of the dismount being so impressive.
Yeah, he almost kicked out there. Kicking out, man, this is really going into wrestling type stuff. Round 13's goal of the week was a mistake. Josh Rochelle got it from his set shot, which was tough angle, about 60 degrees. But if it's not after the siren, it shouldn't be a set shot that wins it. Dion Prestia was the one that we preferred, where he played on when nobody covered him after a free kick, and he made a fool out of both Dane Rampy and Tom McCartan. The only kick that I can think of from last year that I was okay with being a goal of the week that was a set shot was Mac Andrew.
I think of one from Jeremy Cameron in 2022 that wasn't a winner, but was pretty cool because it was a super long barrel from the boundary.
Dan Houston's from 2023 after the siren might have been a finalist. I forget. That's deserved. Your round 14 nominees, Ollie Dempsey, after getting an over-the-back Tyson Stengel handball on the right boundary, kicked check side off one step from about 43 meters out and went through on a bounce. You had Shea Bolton picking up a Luke Jackson kick after Caleb Daniels spoiled it. He sidestepped away for Luke Davies-Uniacke and kicked from 49. That was pretty early. And Kazi Pickett caught a Miles Bergman kick from the defensive 50. He ran on and kicked check side from 47, and he got the exact bounce that he was looking for, kind of off break. It's just another Kazi play. We can't even be surprised. I'm not sure if we're really surprised by any of these happening, especially because Dempsey's was in the fourth quarter. That was the last goal.
I think I'm actually going to take Dempsey.
Most difficult kick, is that why?
Yeah, and it was it wasn't, none of these were amazing to me. None of these were the jump up out of your chair wow moments. Dempsey was more oh man, we're even hitting these. Where if it was in a close game, it would have been closer to a wow moment.
I think I'm narrowly preferring Pickett, but you've got reason to like Dempsey's. Most impressive kick for sure.
Behind of the week, round 13, our winner was Oscar Allen. He bounced a kick from the left pocket that Tristan Jerry managed to touch. This week, we're going with Mark O'Connor. He one-timed one into the post after Reece Stanley went up and didn't quite take a mark, but was able to get his hands on one in a pack in the goal square.
We like one-timers. We like post shots. This brings that together. Of course, it is not nearly the best Geelong behind this year. Our leader in the clubhouse is still comfortably Jeremy Cameron's bicycle into the post on Easter Monday.
Although Will Ashcroft is probably up there as well.
Will Ashcroft, are you thinking about his assist of the week or?
Yeah, then who was it? Someone else had like a ninja kick or something that was cool. I don't know.
Pete fucking Laddams.
Yes. I was thinking of Ashcroft for an assist. You're right. Speaking of assist,
Assist of the week then. Yeah, Will Ashcroft had that Jackie Chan assist to Zach Bailey back in round 4, and that might still lead the way for us. Your round 13 winner was Darcy Fogarty, which at this point, this is probably a finalist. Slapping the ball back through his and Harris Andrews' legs to set up Ben Keys being in the goal scoring club. There were 2 Melbourne assists that we considered this week of their losing effort. Harvey Langford had one from a deep left pocket to set up Jacob Van Rooyen, but we're going with Jake Belksham for his tap over his left shoulder back to Kazi Pickett.
I fell asleep very early in this game, and that still caught my eye.
Next up is Worst on Round.
We've got plenty of deserving candidates this week. Now, remember, if you get subbed in or out, or if you are a part of a late change, you are not eligible for this. It's also really tough to give it to a debutante. So, Lachlan Blackiston, you're safe because you were just handed such shitty circumstances. I hope for his sake he goes out and has some much better games, and I think he will. But our 3 nominees this week are 2 runner-ups. We've got Mitch Hinge, who just had like the Mitch Hinge game of all Mitch Hinge games, a lot of really bad and unnecessary turnovers. Speaking of bad and unnecessary turnovers, Xavier Dersma only got credited with 4 of them, but it felt like all 4 were really bad and led to goals. But our winner this week, it goes all the way back to the round opener. It's Zach Jones from St. Kilda.
We talked about him being one of the more barometer players for the Saints. The team needs to have a good game most of the time for them to perform well. He did not. I'm really surprised that he wasn't subbed out, honestly.
I would be very unsurprised if he's dropped this week.
I mean, it's not like Dan Butler had a great game either, but
yeah, Zach Jones was more like visibly bad, whereas Butler was more non-existent.
Your round 13 main character for our last award, main character last round was Stephen May. He played quite well in that losing King's birthday effort, and then went after Max Gawn after the siren twice.
This one was tricky. We didn't really have an obvious standout.
No, like we could have gone with the new forward order for GWS, but I don't think that dominates the discourse as much as, well, the state of Tasmania.
The entire state of Tasmania.
Yes, like the entire Norwich City Council. You know, from the Friday game, there's the obvious need for the roof in the winter months. Sounds like there's progress with the cricket authorities on the stadium, which is good. The legend himself, David Boone, is helping with that.
This is kind of a culmination of weeks of stadium discourse and political discourse and all sorts of stuff. And it seems like the obvious pick for this week with a game that kind of helped direct things to that sort of discourse.
So this is our second inanimate, I guess, main character of the season after Cyclone Alfred in opening round. You know who I'm talking about by David Boone, right, Ethan?
No.
He's the one that had 52 beers on a Sydney to London flight, the cricketer.
Ah, cool.
And he's like been a match director and stuff for ages.
He and Wade Boggs should be friends.
Right, like it's claimed anywhere from 73 to 107 beers for Wade Boggs on a flight from Boston to Los Angeles. I feel like I would believe David Boone's story more simply because it's Australia.
And the length of the flight is such a big factor too.
Yeah. He's a Sydney to London flight, actually. What the hell is that length? It sounds like in 2027, Qantas is going to start a Sydney to London flight.
Either way, it's a lot more believable.
Yeah, currently the world's longest is Singapore to JFK in New York.
And that's what, like 17?
18 and a half.
I'm going to be taking flights that aren't that long, but I'm going to be on some longer flights.
Your flight to Fiji, is that?
Just SFO to Fiji. That's about 11-ish hours, I think.
You know what? No, I did realize SFO had those direct connections because I've seen the Fiji Airways planes on the international gates.
Yeah, and then Sydney to LAX, I think, on the way home is going to be like 12.
And you're doing that in part because you really want to be on an A380?
Correct!
Hopefully I can make that pilgrimage in a year or two. But we've both got busier afternoons ahead of us. So this is going to be it for round 14. though we still have a couple teams, a few that we didn't cover. Those will be for our progress reports next episode. Until then, I'm on Twitter at BenjaminHK01.
I'm on Twitter at Castle Media. That's with a K. I gotta keep reminding people.
Brian Harambe, Ethan's cat, and our executive producer is on Instagram at catnamedbrian. Collectively, we are at Americans Footy on a bunch of platforms. Thanks for checking in with us once again. Leave a comment, subscribe, do all that you want there. Any feedback is good feedback.